We're moving on to our last story. This one is about Matt Taibbi. So again, Matt Taibbi actually had another hearing in front of Congress, the Committee of Weaponization of the Federal Government. This time more so about social media, where there's certain things that they discuss here that I feel like was a little bit more in depth. I was actually kind of surprised they let them come back, because last time that Matt Taibbi was there, as many of you know, unfortunately, Delegate Plaskett, I always want to call her representative. She's not, she's a delegate. Delegate Plaskett sent Matt Taibbi a letter basically threatening to, basically send him to prison because of perjury, etc. After that interview with Mehdi Hassan. It's just been a mess. The IRS came to his house, etc. We've had Matt on the show. We've talked about this on the show, but they went back. And I think there's something that you need to hear this time around, because Matt Taibbi and Michael Shellenberger are not letting this go. They are still, pushing and fighting for free speech. And I think people need to see what else they have discovered. There were other people on the panel, but we're going to focus on Michael and Matt. Let's get into
Shellenberger, let's start with Mr. Shellenberger. We'll work right down the line. So, Mr. Shellenberger, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Plaskett, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting my testimony. 9 months ago, I testified and provided evidence to the subcommittee about the existence of a censorship industrial complex, a network of government agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security, government contractors, and big tech media platforms that conspired to censor ordinary Americans and elected officials alike for holding disfavored views. I regret to inform the subcommittee today that the scope, power, and law-breaking of the censorship industrial complex are even worse than we had realized back in March. 2 days ago, my colleagues and I published the first batch of internal files from the Cyber Threat Intelligence League, which show US and UK military contractors working in 2019 and 2020 to both censor and turn sophisticated psychological operations and disinformation tactics developed abroad against the American people. Many insist that all that we identified in the Twitter files, the Facebook files, and the CTI files were legal activities by social media platforms to take down content that violated the terms of service. Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and other big tech companies are privately owned, people point out, and free to censor content. And government officials are free to point out wrong information, they argue. But the First Amendment prohibits the government from abridging freedom of speech. The Supreme Court has ruled that the government may not induce, encourage, or promote private persons to accomplish what is constitutionally forbidden to accomplish. And there's now a large body of evidence proving that the government did precisely that. What's more, the whistleblower who delivered the CTIL files to us says that its leader, a quote-unquote former British intelligence analyst, was quote-unquote in the room at the Obama White House in 2017 when she received the instructions to create a counter-disinformation project to, quote, stop a repeat of 2016. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Information Security Agency, CISA, has been the center of gravity for much of the censorship, with the National Science Foundation financing the development of censorship and disinformation tools, and other federal government agencies playing a supportive role. Emails from CISA's NGO and social media partners show that CISA created the Election Integrity Partnership, EIP, in 2020, which involved the Stanford Internet Observatory and other US government contractors. EIP and its successor, the Virality Project, urged Twitter, Facebook, and other platforms to censor social media posts by ordinary citizens and elected officials alike. EIP reported that they had a 75% response rate from the platforms and that 35% of the URLs that they reported were either removed, labeled, or throttled or soft blocked. In 2020, the Department of Homeland Security, CISA, violated the First Amendment and interfered in the election, while in 2021, CISA and the White House violated the First Amendment and undermined America's response to the COVID pandemic by demanding that Facebook and Twitter censor content that Facebook itself said was, quote unquote, often true, including about vaccine side effects.
Let me pause here for just a second. We're going to skip over a little bit because they get into like the jab stuff and YouTube doesn't like that. But one of the things I wanted to say is that the main point here that Michael Shellenberger is trying to get across is that according to the First Amendment, it is actually, against the First Amendment for the US government to do what they did in reference to the Twitter files, to contact Twitter executives and ask them to suppress certain information, remove certain information, delete people from Twitter, remove their accounts, etc. According to the First Amendment, which we should actually sit down sometime and actually go through, he is saying that is against the First Amendment. So the government violated that. That is what he's here to basically prove versus when they were there last time. Let me fast forward just a little bit because he got into the jab stuff. So let's go here.
We choose and whose algorithms are transparent to all of us. I would encourage Congress to prohibit government officials from asking the platforms to remove content which the Supreme Court may or may not rule unconstitutional next year when it decides on the Missouri v. Biden case. Should the court somehow decide that the government requests for censorship are constitutional, then I would urge Congress to require such requests be reported publicly, instantaneously, so that such censorship demands occur in plain sight. Thank you very much for hearing my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Schellenberger. Mr. Taibbi, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Make sure you got the mic on there.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan.
Hit the mic there if you could. Just hit the button there. There we go.
Right, sorry about that. Thank you, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Plaskett, and members of the committee for giving us the opportunity to speak today. Exactly 1 year ago today, I had my first look at the documents that came to be known as the Twitter files. We've learned a lot since then. When Michael and I testified before the good people of this committee in March, we both talked about how this isn't a partisan issue at all, despite the fact that it's been repeatedly described as a right-wing conspiracy theory or a right-wing fantasy. We found evidence of suppression of movements on both sides, including leftist movements like the Yellow Vests, parties like the Green Party, organizations like Consortium Magazine.
I just wanted to pause there for a second because I wanted to make sure everyone heard that. They found suppression on both sides. Did you hear the organizations that he mentioned? The Yellow Vest, right? We all know the Yellow Vest organization from France, and the Green Party. So remember that, because now, Green Party, we're going into the presidential election. Jill Stein is running for president through the Green Party. So pay attention to things like that they were also suppressed.
Just this week, Michael and I reported on the group that he talked about, the CTI League, and in those documents we found evidence of monitoring groups like the Democratic Socialists of America, hashtags like healthcare for all.
That part, that's a big one. Did you guys hear it? Hashtags. So that's another thing that they were suppressing. Healthcare for all, right? So think back to when we had the marches for Medicare for all, healthcare for all, those kind of things. They were actually suppressing that. Why would you suppress healthcare for all, right? That's not offensive, right? They don't want that to get across. Crazy stuff. Probably because they're paid. They got advertisers and sponsors that are part of Big Pharma.
The nature of censorship programs is that they tend to expand in all directions. And these programs already have. As someone who voted for Democrats his whole life and who got his ideas about speech issues from people like Senator Frank Church, Paul Wellstone, and Dennis Kucinich, I believe also that there's a less obvious but more important reason that people across the spectrum should care about this issue. And the former executive director of the ACLU, Ira Glasser, once explained to a group of students why he didn't support hate speech codes on campuses. The problem, he said, wasn't the speech. The problem was, quote, who gets to decide what's hateful? Who gets to decide what to ban? Because, quote, most of the time, it ain't you. The story that came out in the Twitter files, and for which more evidence surfaced in both the Missouri v. Biden lawsuit and this committee's Facebook files releases and in the CTI League documents, they all speak directly to Ira Glasser's concerns. There's been a dramatic shift in attitudes about speech in this country, and many politicians now clearly believe the bulk of Americans can't be trusted to digest information on their own. This mindset imagines that if we see one clip from RT, we'll stop being patriots, that once exposed to hate speech, we'll become bigots ourselves automatically, that if we read even one Donald Trump tweet, we'll become insurrectionists. Having come to this conclusion, The government agencies like the DHS and the FBI and the quasi-private agencies who do anti-disinformation work have taken upon themselves the paternalistic responsibility to sort out for us what is and is not safe. While they see great danger in allowing others to read controversial material, it's taken for granted that they themselves will be immune to the dangers of speech. This leads to the one inescapable question about these new anti-disinformation programs that is never discussed but needs to be. Who does this work? Stanford's Election Integrity Project helpfully made a graphic showing the quote-unquote external stakeholders involved in their content review operation. It showed 4 columns: government, civil society, platforms, and media. There's one group that's conspicuously absent from that list: people, ordinary people. Whether America continues the informal sub-rosa censorship system we've seen in the Twitter files or the Facebook files, or whether it formally adopts something like Europe's draconian New Digital Services Act, it's already abundantly clear who won't be involved in this kind of work. There'll be no dock workers doing content flagging, no poor people from inner city neighborhoods, no single moms pulling multiple waitressing jobs, no immigrant store owners or Uber drivers.
Yep.
These programs will always feature a tiny, rarefied sliver of affluent professional class Americans censoring a huge and ever-expanding pool of everyone else.
Now here comes the class issue. So this point that Matt just made here, who was actually making the decisions to decide what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, what should be suppressed, what shouldn't be suppressed? It's affluent people and organizations. It's not working class people. We have no say in what is decided is censored or not. Again, it goes back to the ruling class. The ruling class is the one who is controlling all of this. They're the ones that call for censorship. They're the ones that say it's okay to say one thing, but it's not okay to say another. Now, let's fast forward and let's think about what's happening with Israel and Gaza. Who's making the decisions about what you can and cannot say in reference to that particular conflict? It's not working class people. It's the ruling class elite. It's the oligarchs. And this is what I've continued to try to tell people. We don't really make decisions. We may make some decisions here in our personal lives, but when it comes to a grand scheme of things, we don't make decisions. We can't even vote in our country to decide whether or not we want to send money to another country abroad. We don't get to participate in those votes. We have representatives there in DC that are supposed to represent us, but they don't because they're bought. We make no decisions on the grand scheme of things. We're just here as little puppets, and the ruling class makes all the decisions, even when it comes to censorship. So I'm very happy that he brought in the class issue about the censorship complex.
Take away the highfalutin talk about countering hate and reducing harm, and anti-disinformation is just a bluntly elitist gatekeeping exercise. If you prefer to think in progressive terms, it's class war. If one small demographic over here has broad control over the whole speech landscape, and a great big one over there has no control whatsoever, it follows that one of those groups will end up with more political power than the other. Which one is the winner? To paraphrase our Glasser, it probably ain't yours. It isn't just one side or the other that will lose if these programs are allowed to continue. It's pretty much everyone, which is why these programs must be defunded before it's too late. Thank you very much.
So very well said there from Matt. I have another piece that I want to go to in this discussion, so I've time-stamped these. I want to bring in this gentleman here when he talks about some of the worst things that they found.
Two of you have been here before, and I think it's important to ask. You mentioned some of the current activities as you continue to monitor it, and you particularly mentioned the protest and the activities related to Israel's attempt to get back its hostages. Can you elaborate on some of the specifics that you think you see here in the way of either suppression or amplification? Is there any evidence that we're continuing to see, if you will, a bias that social media doesn't have a problem reporting one side, but does have a problem reporting the other side? I know it's a tough question.
Yeah. I mean, we've certainly, I mean, I think we've all seen calls for, I mean, I think to Matt's point that this is not a partisan issue, that we should all, that the test of your commitment to free speech is that you would like to see the speech that you really despise protected and that you would defend it. And I think we've seen calls for censoring pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas speech and have been disturbed by that. And Rupa has described that. And we've also seen calls for censorship of the other side. We've seen misinformation spread on all sides. So I think that what you're hearing from us is a general call that everybody needs to just calm down and remember that this country's greatness is really founded on that protection for that kind of, that protection of speech that we all might consider to be hateful. I always remind people that, you know, some of the most important court decisions by the Supreme Court were protecting the speech of neo-Nazis in the Brandenburg decision, in the decision in Skokie. If we can tolerate neo-Nazis marching through neighborhoods of Holocaust survivors, certainly I think we're capable of tolerating people defending violent attacks.
And that brings us.
Let me just bring up something really quick there in reference to what he just said. So we've known for quite some time that Palestinian voices were being suppressed on Twitter, right? So if you're a Palestinian leftist, you're going to experience even more suppression. But the Twitter files confirmed it. That was the thing. So the Twitter files gave us more concrete evidence for things that we thought was happening, but we didn't really have something that we could just nail it on and say, hey, this is proof that they're suppressing certain people. There's a Palestinian account on Twitter right now that for whatever reason, whenever you follow that account, Twitter unfollows you from the account. Multiple people have posted it on Twitter and they said, why do they keep unfollowing me from this Palestinian account? So there was already suppression in reference to Palestinian accounts before October 7th, mind you. But the part there that he said about neo-Nazis marching through neighborhoods, I just want people to know something because I don't think people experience this everywhere, but I've lived in different places and I've lived in the South. Okay, I'm in Massachusetts now, but I've lived in the South. When I lived in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, there were Klan rallies. These things still happen. I still remember the neo-Nazis marching through downtown Columbia, South Carolina, when I was a senior in college. This still happens. A lot of people don't realize that. If you haven't seen it, it's not happening through your town or where you live, these kind of things, but it's a little bit more overt in the South, right? Racism is more overt down there than it is in the Northeast. Here, it's a little bit more covert, but shit still happens. But the thing is, those things still happen here in the United States today. And that goes back to that right to protest, assembly, and rally. So this is why I was saying when they were calling for an end to the pro-Palestinian marches, I'm like, I haven't seen anybody call for an end to the neo-Nazi marches that happen throughout this country every year. So that's something to think about. Let's continue here. I think he's going to ask Matt
To a
next
question, as we bring you back here and some new witnesses, do we have a challenge in America that we're constantly looking at what should be censored, rather than how do we get more free speech so that the counter opinions are heard as loudly as those who yell and are heard the first time?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. I think it's important to remember that the First Amendment not only guarantees people the right to speak and voice their opinions, but it also guarantees the right of all of us to hear those opinions. That's a crucial element of the promise.
So that goes to a follow-up. If that's the case, your suggestion about a instantaneous and transparent unveiling of any and all reduction, throttling, et cetera. Let's assume for a moment it's technically possible, quickly, it's certainly possible, but let's just say it was technically possible quickly. We're a legislative body. Do you believe it's appropriate for us in a Transparency Act to mandate that this happen so that we no longer have the kind of things that happened to the chairman, where he simply was systematically throttled so that he wasn't censored, he simply wasn't heard very loudly? If we had had that, do you believe that it would have changed the outcome, and should Congress look at mandating it?
I can say something about that. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I strongly support transparency. You know, if you require, for example, that government officials or people supported by the government, such as this EIP or VP group, and by the way, just to give you some quotes.
Well, you mean what the ranking member described as legitimate, suggestions, and it was independent.
Right.
Isn't that always the defense, though, is that we didn't make the decision and the other guy didn't make the decision, it just happened?
Right.
I'm down to just a few seconds, and I do want to thank our Canadian for pointing out that we are about one step away from defunding here in the United States bank accounts. This administration has returned, so you understand, in the United States, to making sure that people selling products or involved in activities that they don't want fail to have access. And that is another form of censorship that, I'm sorry it's gone so far in Canada, but trust me, it's underway in this country. Mr. Chairman, I thank you.
Okay, that's the point there that he brings up about the financial punishment, where they actually, Justin Trudeau did do that seize the bank accounts of the truckers that were protesting. That also is another form of censorship. And then I want to get to this piece here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just absolutely fascinating to me how the folks on the left side of this dais are calling these things conspiracy theories, when just through the Missouri v. Biden case, there is a treasure trove of actual evidence in a court proceeding, witness testimony, factual evidence that shows that all of this has been happening under the Biden administration, and that there is true censorship from this White House into the American people. Mr. Schellenberger, I want to start with you.
That's something I just want to add to as well, guys. We need to remember when people mention the lesser of two evils, again, like I said, evil is evil. Let's all remember all these things that they're pointing out. This is not to say censorship wasn't happening before, but it was definitely worse under Joe Biden's administration. So that's something to keep in mind. This happened under a Democrat president.
On November 2nd, 2023, you posted an article on your Substack entitled FBI and DHS Directors Mislead Congress About Censorship. In the post, you detail Senator Paul's recent questioning of DHS Secretary Mayorkas and FBI Director Wray regarding their respective departments' censorship activities. Notably, Secretary Mayorkas and Director Wray both testified that their agency personnel complied with the law and did not violate First Amendment rights by targeting constitutionally protected speech on social media platforms. Given what we have learned in recent months from the Missouri v. Biden case and your investigative reporting shining the light on the Cyber Threat Intelligence League, is it fair to say that Secretary Mayorkas and Director Wray lied to Congress when they told Senator Paul that their agency personnel did not target constitutionally protected speech?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that they misled Congress. I can't be sure of their intention, but they're wrong that those agencies weren't involved in demanding censorship by the social media platforms.
And just briefly, like how were they involved in censoring speech? Well, I don't want to read your whole article, just...
Oh, sure. I mean, FBI agents were directly flagging content to Twitter saying this appears to violate your terms of service. What about this? What about that? Same thing with DHS staff. And then, of course, DHS created the Election Integrity Partnership, which then became the Virality Project, which was in the process of demanding mass censorship of Americans.
And based on them reaching out, a lot of these social media companies then acted on that, like the Hunter Biden laptop, all these different activities, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to remember the context is that this was at a time when the social media companies were being threatened to lose their ability to operate, which is the Section 230. One of the most dramatic instances, which is in the Facebook files, is where the White House is demanding that Facebook censor content that they think could lead to people becoming hesitant to take the vaccine. Facebook responded and said that they were removing often true content of vaccine side effects.
Okay, we're going to skip forward just a little bit there because they get to the jab stuff. And then we'll get to the map part here. I have to say, out of all of the social media platforms, Facebook is the worst with the censorship from what I've seen so far. That one is a doozy.
Many federal officials to adhere to their oath they took to uphold and defend the Constitution. And it's up to Congress to ensure our First Amendment rights are protected. And the remaining time I have, Mr. Taibbi, if you could just comment on what you weren't able to respond to from Mrs. Wasserman Schultz.
Yes, well, first of all, just for the record, I've said on many occasions that I'm not a free speech absolutist. In fact, no journalist is or can be. We all operate under very serious restrictions involving libel, defamation, incitement. We have to navigate each one of those rules every time we publish anything. And then we always look fondly on that process because we believe those rules protect us. So we're not free speech absolutists. We're just not in favor of government censorship. That's the issue here. There's a profound difference between litigating something like libel or defamation and having an unelected, unaccountable, unseen committee remove your content without any due process. That's what we're talking about.
So to show you what he's responding to, because I think I skipped over Debbie. Let me try to go back to, we'll bring her back in. I thought I had, let me see. There she is. So we're going to bring in Top Ramen. That's what I call Debbie because Debbie got the Top Ramen hair coming on. We're going to bring her in. She was, of course, as you can imagine, was that Thunder? She was not nice to Matt. There we go.
Part of your humanity. And it demonstrates how hatred can drive humans to do unspeakable things to one another. And nowhere is hatred more evident than on social media. Since the October 7th attack, anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim hate speech has exploded online. In just 1 month after the attack, the hashtag Hitler was right appeared in over 46,000 posts. But the rhetoric isn't limited to hate speech and death threats. Jewish conspiracy theories and disinformation continually find safe harbor on social media platforms. Even the racist and anti-Semitic Great Replacement theory was recently amplified on Twitter/X by none other than its owner, Elon Musk, and the right-wing darling, Tucker Carlson. Terrorists use the platforms to terrorize target populations, and Hamas even used the personal accounts of hostages and victims to live stream their brutality to incite further violence. Mr. Taibbi, yes or no? Should social media companies allow rape and murder to be live streamed by terrorists on their platforms in order to create fear and incite violence?
Notice they always use those two examples, right?
I believe that would violate their terms of service, would it not?
So your answer is no, it should not, they should not be allowed to do that.
So she's such a bitch. I'm sorry, I really can't stand this woman. But the point when Matt said there that would be against their terms of service, the point is that you can't do that on those platforms anyway, because it goes against the Twitter terms of agreement. Same thing with Facebook, same thing with TikTok. All those platforms, they have certain things that you cannot do. That's a part of the terms of agreement. Otherwise, your content will be removed. Your account will be deleted. So it's just, it's true. It's like, it really doesn't matter what Matt believes or not. It's what are the rules of that platform. So Twitter isn't going to allow you to show those things anyway.
Live stream rape and murder? No,
Right.
I think that would count as speech that would be prohibited under their terms.
Good. You do have absolutist policies, but
I do not have absolute. I do not have.
Please don't interrupt me. You have absolute. I've asked your question. You answered it. You do have absolutist policies. At least they have some limits. But I think a Homeland Security official.
If you have absolutist policies, you wouldn't have any limits. So you see that? You see what she just did there?
With respect, Congresswoman, all journalists operate
reclaiming
under
my time.
limits.
If a Homeland Security official echoed your opinion, you would call it censorship, but I'm glad that at least you acknowledge that rape and murder should not be allowed on social media platforms. Ms. Troy, I have the same question. Yes or no? Should social media companies take down brutal images of rape and murder live streamed by Hamas or similar groups like ISIS?
Notice she changed the question. See, I just wanted to say something here. When she asked Matt that question, she said, should it be allowed on the platform? But when she said, same question to this young woman here, she said, should they take down those posts? So the question isn't really the same. Pay close attention to that.
I agree with
No,
Mr.
Ms. Troy.
Oh,
Ms. Troy,
Ms. Troy. You were looking at me, sorry.
sorry.
Yeah, I believe they should follow their internal policies and they should absolutely not leave content up like that. And I can tell you as someone who worked on the Christ.
Okay, you hear this? Okay. Notice how she let her speak. Notice that she said they should follow their internal policies. Wasn't that the same thing that Matt Taibbi was saying? But she didn't let him finish. She's letting her finish. That's because this woman here is, if you heard her earlier speech in this conference, this woman here is basically, she was trying to warn people about the dangers of Donald Trump being reelected. So this is someone who's on the Democrat Party side. Whereas Matt and Michael are trying to tell people this should not be a partisan issue. Censorship affects everybody, regardless a part of what party that you are, right? So just notice how they play favoritism towards certain people. She basically said the same thing that Matt Taibbi did, but Top Ramen's going to top. And then I think she went to, yeah. So that was what he was responding to in reference to Debbie Weiserman Schultz. Someone asked me before what brand or what flavor of Top Ramen. Because she's wearing the pink jacket, I'm going to go with the shrimp Top Ramen. We'll go ahead and call it that there. But yes, so Matt Taibbi was there yet again. And I think that, who knows where this is going to go from here. But the fact that he was brought back there again, it tells me maybe there could be some type of push here in reference to the government intervening in social media. Hopefully it's a push in the right direction, because I don't want the government telling us what we can or can't say on social media either. So there's that. Thank you for the super chat, Justin. They suppressed the Green Party because despite what they say, the Green Party is a threat to the duopoly and they know it.